You really gonna give me a gift like that? That doesn't even look like a gift. That looks more like a threat. That doll? That thing? No. Hello everybody, today I'm going to be creating a full timeline of the entire Conjuring universe, which is very loosely based off of the paranormal events of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now this is going to be part one of a two-part series because there's way too much information to make one video about this. So in this video we will be discussing the origins of the demons in the Conjuring universe up until the first Conjuring movie. Also the movies which I've included within this timeline are The Conjuring, The Conjuring 2, The Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It, Annabelle, Annabelle Creation, Annabelle Comes Home, The Nun 2, and The Curse of La Llorona. So a lot of movies. And if you find that I have not spoken about your favorite Conjuring movie in part one, do not get pissed at me, do not cyberbully me, do not send me death threats, because I will find your voodoo doll and I will stab it and then throw it off a 9-story building. Trust and believe, you will feel pain. Glad we can understand that. Now let's move on. So here is part one to my Conjuring universe timeline. And we begin this timeline in 20 BCE, which is very far back. I was not expecting this movie lore to go that far back. But regardless, we start there because we get to see the first ever documentation of the demon Malthus. Yes, remember that name. We see that documentation in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, the demon Malthus would go on to pursue a career in ventriloquism because he would go on to possess the doll of Annabelle. Yeah. And in 500 BCE, we get introduced to the demon Valick. And I'm not going to assume anything, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that is a queen because... And the reason why I mentioned Valick so early on in the story is because Valick was summoned by the Satan-worshipping Duke of St. Carta for no known reason other than the fact that this man probably just wanted to summon some baddies. But he was eventually stopped by the church, who broke in mid-ritual, sealed up the portal to hell by using the blood of Christ in a holy relic, which is quite fascinating. How do we have the blood of Christ 500 years after his death? Also, the castle that this ritual was done in was eventually turned into an abbey so they could have a bunch of nuns protecting the seal. Make sense? We do end up skipping to the 1400s when a book named The Strigaria is written. Now, The Strigaria isn't your typical fan fiction. This is a book that was created to identify and look out for witchcraft, essentially used as like a witch hunting tactic book. And moving on to 1673, we're on a vacation in the beautiful countryside of Mexico when we get to meet a young woman who has been heartbroken by her husband who's been on another woman on the low behind her back. Oh my God. And in a fit of rage, she does what any normal woman would do. She drowns her kids in a river. Honestly, she kind of gagged. Them kids. Was that wrong of me to say? Did I up again, guys? Are you guys mad at me?
Are you guys mad at me for something? Make me drink alone. Don't make me drink alone.
And on a more serious note, girl, why the did you kill your kids? You could have easily just grabbed your husband by the balls, tied him up to a horse, paraded him through town, and then chopped his balls off at the end of that. Like, literally, there's no reason to do that to your two sons. They're innocent. They were not partaking in the crime. Your husband is the criminal. And now it looks like you're the criminal too, okay? And once the deed is done, she realizes that what she did is kind of bad. So she decides to pause her game of life, and that starts the Curse of La Llorona. Which, not to sound extra white of me, not to really bring out the Mayo monkey inside of me, but I fear I did not know this was the story of La Llorona. I thought she was just a childless divorcee, not a child murdering divorcee. However, I do need to note that the director of La Llorona did state that this movie isn't a part of the Conjuring universe because it didn't have one of the key producers for the Conjuring series, aka Peter Safran, which that does not make sense at all because there is quite literally way too many things in the Conjuring universe inside of the Curse of La Llorona. Like, it literally sounds like you're trying to retcon this entire bullshit because you're embarrassed that the movie didn't hit the box office records you were hoping to hit. Your movie flopped, but it's still a part of the Conjuring universe. I can't rewrite history for you, bitch. You did it yourself. Like, you literally sound like a teenager deleting their search history on the family laptop. Girl, I saw it. I saw the freaky shit you're looking at, and that freaky shit deserves to belong in the Conjuring universe. And now we move on to 1692 in Massachusetts for the Salem witch trials, and we get to see Marytown Esty burn at the stake. And this woman is significant because she is one of the ancestors of Bathsheba, aka the witch from the first Conjuring movie. Now, if you do want to see a little bit more of an in-depth talk about the Conjuring movie, you should go and watch my latest video. And now we move to 1812 and we get to see Bathsheba being born, and then 1844 she gets married to the love of her life, Judson Sherman, and then she goes on to have a baby with her husband. However, this happy life eventually gets eradicated when she decides to start practicing witchcraft, where she then decides to kill her baby, and then she decides to curse anyone who tries to take her land, and then she professes her love to Satan, and then she goes into the backyard and then hangs herself on the tree that's just begging to be in a horror movie. That was gnarly.
Tesla.
But before the Perrin family moves into the Conjuring home, we do have to talk about the ferryman. And now the ferryman is a little bit of an indie darling in the Conjuring universe because he was introduced in the 2019 movie Annabelle Comes Home, and that movie, I'm not gonna lie, no one watched it. Like, no one watched Annabelle Comes Home at all, so I don't blame you for not knowing who the this young man is. So let's get into the occupation of the ferryman. This man's job was to ferry souls across the river Styx. He was basically a Grim Reaper-esque kind of character, and he does a string of murders in the early 1900s. At least that's what you can kind of infer, because that's what the victims look like. Moving to 1926 and 1927, Ed and Lorraine Warren are eventually born separately in different homes. They're not family members. Then on March 2nd, 1930, Lorraine Warren's cousin, Irene Palmer, is eventually born. And now this also shifted the world. Now Irene and Lorraine both have the powers to communicate with the dead, which is a really cool party trick, but like, imagine being home alone and then all of a sudden Elvis Presley walks into the home and tries to spiritually link with you. Like, imagine your home being full of ghosts at all times, not paying rent, pissing you off, messing with your electronics. Oh, I'd be livid. You turn off my rose toy, I turn off your life, okay?
I'm using my rose toy.
I can't even use a rose toy. Just the word rose toy makes me so... It makes my heart go pizza-pasa. Also, this power can be linked back to their shared bloodline of St. Lucy, the patron saint of the blind, which I guess all blind people can see ghosts, is what we're inferring from this. And now back to Bathsheba. At some point, the property that she was living on was eventually sold and turned into a bunch of different properties. So with new people moving onto the land, the curse started taking place. And during this time, a young boy drowned in the river, a maid committed suicide, a little boy named Rory was murdered by his mother, and that mother then committed suicide in the cellar. And after that tragedy, we moved to Brookfield, Connecticut, where a priest named Father Kastner eventually decides to get his willy wet, thus producing a daughter, which that daughter's mother ends up dying in childbirth. So he has to then take that daughter into his own house and then raise her secretly without the rest of the world knowing, because otherwise his priesthood would be compromised. Oh, okay. So the father's embarrassed of f***ing a woman on the low, but when the consequences come through, he wants to make sure that child is literally having a saw life, like that child is being locked in a prison for its entire life. Oh, but it was a happy life according to him. Right. And this child would eventually be known as Isla Kastner. So keep her in your brain. Keep her in your brain, because she's a lot. And while this is happening on the East Coast, we must move back to the West Coast, because in 1936, the Mullins family decide to have sex.
I'm about to f***ing climax in the pajama aisle.
Thus producing their first and only daughter, Annabelle Mullins. Yeah. Y'all see where this is going, right? And after that sexy interlude, we move back to the East Coast, because in 1938, Lorraine sees her first vision at 11 years old, where she sees an old man watching over a child at a hospital. I'm not gonna call anyone a freak, but I think there's a certain file in the room. Get out of that child's hospital room. Along with that, around that time, Irene's mother was sent to a mental institution after trying to commune with the dead. What, so we're locking up women with hobbies? She's simply adding whimsy back to her boring life because it's the 1950s. However, once her mother was sent away, Irene admits that she actually is having the same kind of visions as her mother. And instead of throwing her away into a mental institution, a bishop's like, hey, diva, this is a superpower. Yes, you've got superpowers. So we're going to ship you off to Europe. Yeah. You're never going to see your mom again. You're never going to see any of your family members again. But you know what? We're going to train you. You're going to become a Christian Avenger. We're going to hone those superpowers so you can fight the intergalactic space demons of this world. That is not a Christian warrior. That is an 11-year-old. That is a child who wants to watch Bluey. There is no fucking way she's going to fight the devil. She's going to fight you when you try and take her away from her cocomelon. Now put her back in front of that fucking iPad. But we move on to the 1940s, and guess what? It's World War II, and there are air raids happening right next to the abbey that Valick is trapped inside of, thus disrupting the seal, thus meaning Valick can escape. Ooh. And around that same time in SoCal, Samuel Mullins is running a little toy company, and his daughter Annabelle Mullins gets hit by a Jeep Grand Cherokee, murdering her.
Everyone wants to sue me once I hit them with my Jeep Grand Cherokee.
There's a lot of kids getting murdered in these movies, like, actually. And with the family mourning the death of their daughter, obviously, the demon Malthus decides to show up and is like, hey guys, I'm gonna cosplay as your daughter, and you should allow me to enter that little freaky doll that you've made. Which they do allow him to move in. Duh, they want a roommate. But not long after, they catch onto its sinister vibes and attempt to fight it. But then the demon takes out Miss Mullins' left eye, which is obviously bad. So they decide, all right, we're gonna call up the priest and have him paper mache Bible pages across our closet and trap the doll in the closet, I guess. Which I didn't know that was a strategy you could do to suppress a demon, but I guess we're paper macheing closets now. But honestly, if you did that to me, you put me in a closet, you paper mached a bunch of pictures of Elon Musk all over the walls, I guess that would do the same. But you're not keeping me in that closet. I will find a way out. And trust, Annabelle will find a way out. Back to the East Coast, in 1948, Ed and Lorraine Warren meet in Connecticut for the first time and sparks fly. And not long after meeting, the couple realizes that they could make a lot of money scamming people into thinking that they have paranormal issues and not mental health problems.
They want me to drink another whiskey, dude. That's a weird impulse. Out of all the times that we've been ghost hunting and stuff, I have never had an impulse. I want to drink that right now. I want another shot of this whiskey right now.
But then you're gonna be drunk.
It's the weirdest thing, like I want to do it.
And one of their first cases that they take on is the ferryman. Yes, I told you he would come back. And they encounter this man while on a case looking for a missing girl. And they eventually trap him in the coin purse that he uses to cover the eyes of his victims. A coin purse? Really? Just get a blindfold already. Like, move with the times. And while this is happening, across the pond, Valick is doing its 75 hard and is preparing to leave the abbey. But the nuns don't like this because the nuns hate a coming out story. So they decide to do a midnight prayer, which Valick ends up hating so much that he decides to kill all but 2 of the nuns. So that's looking pretty bad, but I mean, this is what happens when you stop a man from coming out. You get wrath. So, let him be a queen. In 1952, the last 2 remaining sisters of the abbey, Victoria and Abigail, begin to get desperate, not for lesbianism, but desperate for the Holy Grail, because it contains the blood of Jesus Christ, Mr. JC. And that might be the only thing that can kill Valick. But while searching for this doohickey, Valick eventually kills Abigail, and Victoria is forced to kill herself, because if Valick possesses Victoria, he can then leave the church. But if he doesn't have anyone to possess, he's trapped in the abbey forever. But all this work to keep Valick in the closet eventually goes to waste when Irene is like, all right, I'm having a vision of an abbey in Eastern Europe. I have to go. So she decides to go on her little adventure over there, and she meets this young man named Frenchie along the way. And Frenchie's like, hey, I actually can help you find the Holy Grail. Why do you know where the Holy Grail is, dude? You're some random white boy of the month. Why do you know where that is? What are you talking about? Yeah, the Holy Grail. These movies used to be about ghost stories, and now we're bringing in ancient artifacts from the Crusades. What is going on? Regardless, the Holy Grail is eventually used by Irene to spit up the blood of JC. Yeah, she drank the blood of JC and then spat it out onto Valick's face, thus pushing Valick into hell. Oh. Maybe that was the real thing. Maybe Irene actually slays. Maybe Irene is the final girl. However, we do discover that Valick does lay dormant inside of Frenchie, thus allowing Valick to backpack across Europe and do the typical white boy move and ruin the vibe of innocent civilians across Western Europe. It sucks, especially when you see an annoying white boy who's kind of conventionally attractive doing something fun. He's evil. White boy behavior. I am victim of it too. Now we cut back to the Northeast and we find out that Isla Kastner is not a little girl anymore. She's a 20-year-old and she's escaped her father's home to go to the big city to pursue her big dreams of joining a satanic cult.
Thinking about you.
That is beautiful. Also later that year, Sister Irene realizes that she's done with being around men, so she decides to move to a new convent in Italy to complete her vows. Honestly, the right move. You should leave men. Men are evil, putrid, and disgusting. Especially Frenchie. Do not go back to that boy. And then 1953 hits and we return to SoCal, where we get to meet a young girl named Janice who has just now contracted polio and is an orphan. Yeah, she's been kind of dealt the worst cards I've ever seen in life, but can't fix them now. Good luck with polio, I guess. But moving on, we find out that Janice and her fellow orphans are actually moving into the Mullen family home because the Mullen family home has to repent for their quote-unquote sins of allowing a demon into their home. Did I hear that right? Because what it sounds like is you guys are repenting for your sins of being scammed by an evil demon for thinking that you're communicating with your young daughter beyond the veil. That is not a sin, girl. If that's a sin, then my grandparents are sinning every day because they're sending me AI-generated pictures being like, all right, is this real? And it's literally a picture of AI generated Jesus saving a demon from an airplane crash right next to 9/11. What?
Can I get the juicy Sigma male steak with fries and then my girlfriend's gonna get a salad? What? Okay, calm down. Why are you so mad? Is it because you're PMSing again?
And besides that entire mess, why are they allowing a plethora of teenage girls to move into a home that has an active demon located within a closet that's only being locked in there by a bunch of paper mache Bible pages? Like, those kids are getting killed. But whatever. Like, it's clear that you don't even give a shit about these kids. I mean, look at the way that they're acting around them. This Mr. Mullins doesn't even care, and Miss Mullins is too ashamed to even leave her bedroom. All she's doing is bed rotting all day. And not long after moving in, Janice does end up getting possessed by the demon, which then leads to both of the Mullins getting murdered. And the way that Mr. Mullins dies is by having all of his fingers turn in the opposite direction, as if he's messing up while trying to spell blood with his fingers. But the even crazier thing on top of that is that the nun living within the home sees his dead body and is like, all right, I mean, it sucks. People are gonna die, but let's just stay in the house for a little while longer, even though someone just died inside the home. Girl, I'd rather be on the streets.
I ran the streets since I was young. Streets killed me.
And because the girls decide not to leave, Miss Mullins gets murdered. And the way that she gets murdered is by having her body hung up on the wall and then the lower half of her body cut in half. It's quite literally one of the most gruesome scenes in the movie. And I'm not going to show a picture of that because the art department did a little bit too good, because that looked way too real. Like, it looked like a real crime scene. We need to defund the art department in the film world because that made me gag. I'm not happy. Are you happy? You shouldn't be happy, because if you're happy about that, go to prison. And once they spot Mrs. Mullins' dead body in her bedroom, they decide to lock up Janice inside the Bible room. They call the police come, they come into the closet and they're like, hey, so there's no kid. In fact, there is just a doll and a big gaping hole in the wall that we assume this child crawled out of. Now, I don't know why, but we are not going to investigate this any further because you're claiming demonic possession, even though you locked a paralyzed child inside of a closet filled with Bibles and a creepy doll. Yeah, from an outside perspective, this looks perfectly clean. It doesn't look as though you're abusing this child. And then we discover that Janice has actually escaped to pursue her dreams in the big city of Los Angeles. And on top of that, she gets adopted by the Higgins family underneath the name of Annabelle Higgins. Oh, you shady little bitch. You stole the name of the dead baby of the family that fostered you? Oh, Diva, you're going to hell for that. You are going to hell. Annabelle Higgins. Also, I do feel like I need to note that Janice was disabled prior to being possessed, but once she got possessed, somehow she was able to walk again, and I think that was because the ghosts decided to use their levitation powers to move her limbs. And while Annabelle Higgins is living it up in Los Angeles, we do find out that the Annabelle doll is given to the police underneath the assumption that the doll is no longer possessed, which I'm not really sure if that's the case, but am I gonna do about it, right? If it's the police who get murdered, I invite it. Thank you.
Officer!
We then move back to Europe, where the church discovers that there is a string of murders in Europe that is looking awfully like it's Valick, because every single victim seems to be a descendant of the Saint Lucy. Yes, the patron saint of the blind. Irene, you better watch your back. And because Sister Irene hasn't been through enough in the eyes of the Vatican, they decide, hey, you need to get back on the battlefield. We need you to fight this demon because you didn't take him down the first time and you flopped. So get back out there and kill Valick. So Sister Irene makes her way over to Frenchie. She does an exorcism on him. Apparently vibes go great, but we do figure out that that was probably not the last exorcism of Valick, because if Valick is going to do anything, Valick is going to have the last laugh as she watches you try and eliminate her. And after this, Frenchie decides that Europe is completely chopped, so he decides to live his American dream and move to Massachusetts, where he gets married and presumably has kids and just lives a very quiet, calm life. And Valick remains completely dormant. Or, on the other hand, that could just be Valick wanting to move to the US to have a cottagecore moment and have a wife, which is honestly kind of cute, and I can't blame her for that. And on October 1st, 1961, Lorraine Warren gives birth to her first and only child, Judy Warren, the freakishly psychic tween. And in 1965, Annabelle Higgins decides that she's done with her comfortable LA lifestyle, so she decides to move away and join the Disciples of Ram, a satanic cult in Los Angeles. And I can't be too mad at her for that, because she's a woman going after exactly what she wants. Like, it would be anti-feminist for me to say, don't join that satanic cult. In 1966, the Warrens traveled to England to investigate the case of Billy Ramsey, who claimed he was a werewolf, which is literally just a furry's dream. I don't know why this man is complaining. Like, don't piss me off. There's plenty of people who would pay for this procedure.
It's me again.
Chill out. And yet you're complaining about it. Moving to 1967, the married couple of John and Mia Forum begin preparing to have a baby when John gives her a creepy doll to be added to her already unsettling collection. Like, genuinely, this is a little shop of horrors kind of situation right now. I'm a little bit concerned. You're making me feel very uncanny valley right now. I don't like you. And this doll ends up being Annabelle. And I'm not gonna lie, some part of me gets a little bit unsettled whenever I see someone at their big age having a collection of uncanny valley dolls. Like, it makes me feel like there's something sinister going on with you, or at least something sinister happened in your childhood. I'm looking at you, Trixie Mattel. The going on with that doll collection? This is then followed up with adult Annabelle arriving back home on October 2nd to greet her adoptive parents. But that greeting goes south when she decides to slit the throat of her father and murder her mother.
Annabelle!
Hi, Mom.
And then she goes next door to greet her neighbors, and she decides to kill herself on top of the Annabelle doll, thus transferring her soul back into the Annabelle doll. That is a beautiful greeting. I always love unconventional first encounters, but Annabelle, you might want to fix your delivery because it's looking a little bit aggressive. You are smearing blood on their baby's bedroom walls, and you are scaring the ever-loving to me, along with your weird little cult posse that is following you around. And after this traumatic event, Mia Forum decides to call up Father Perez and is like, hey, how do you deal with a demon? And he's like, well, I think what the demon is doing right now is using your baby's soul as a bargaining chip for your soul. Okay, so this demon is acting like a finance bro. You're about to piss me off. Stop trying to bargain, barter, and deal with me. I don't want your stocks. I want my daughter's soul. However, the Annabelle doll does end up possessing Father Perez when he takes it for research purposes, which not even going to question that because I know priests have a very long history of taking children home and doing unspeakable acts. So we're going to move on from that. All right, guys? Yes, we are. So the neighbor Evelyn walks in and is like, hey, I'm racked with the guilt of killing my own child. Take my soul. Take it instead. So she gets possessed and then she jumps out of the balcony window and kills herself. But at the same time, this feels like an elevated version of the black best friend trope, making it into the black best neighbor trope, which that sentence doesn't even make sense to me. Like, what are you gonna get out of your neighbor? Maybe some ASMR sex noises? And now in 1968, the Annabelle doll resurfaces in some weird little thrift store, and it's then purchased by some gilf. Some grandma I would like to fuck. Yeah, I said it. We all said it. Look at her. Yeah. Pretty hot commodity right there. But regardless, she ends up gifting the Annabelle doll to her daughter Camilla, which is a little bit concerning because if I was that daughter Camilla, I would throw that shit away. I would incinerate that doll. That is the ugliest fucking doll I've ever seen in my life. You're really gonna buy this as a gift for someone? You're really gonna give me a gift like that? That doesn't even look like a gift. That looks more like a threat. That doll? That thing? No. And later that spring, Camilla and her lesbian roommate end up hearing noises inside the house. And no, it's not the noises of her prisoner straight boy roommate. It's actually the noises of the Annabelle doll moving around the home. What is up with that? I'm not used to lesbians being this stupid. I'm used to them being geniuses. What the happened? And they eventually, unknowingly, allow the demon Malthus to move back into the Annabelle doll because the demon scams them into believing that it's actually a baby named Annabelle. But they eventually realize that they were also scammed, so they decide to throw the doll away, and when it re-enters the apartment, they're like, all right, so we gotta call the Warrens because this is a little bit weird. I don't like this funky vibe. And the Warrens eventually decide to bless the apartment, and then they take the Annabelle doll back with them to their weird, creepy museum of spooky objects, whatever. I don't get it. It's stupid. The concept of it is insane to me. Having a child in a home with a battalion of spooky objects, but whatever. Regardless, we're gonna move on from that. So they decide to pick up the Annabelle doll, put it inside of a case made of chapel glass, which I'm not even going to question why that's supposedly stronger than bulletproof glass, but whatever, chapel glass it is. Around 1969, Father Kastner began investigating the disciples of Ram under the assumption that his daughter has enrolled in their Satan 101 class. And in September 1971, the Warrens eventually get a call from someone, I don't know who, but it's about a French-Canadian farmer who is having crosses form on their stomach and is able to speak Latin backwards. But now it's finally revealed that that little farmer boy is actually a close friend of ours. That is Maurice Frenchy Thorold. Gag. And during this exorcism, Valick reaches out to Lorraine, shows her a vision of Ed being absolutely impaled by a massive wooden spear.
Sorry, Lorraine.
And I'm not gonna lie, it's looking like Ed won't make it. Yeah,
People are gonna die. It's inevitable.
But this vision ends up scaring the out of Lorraine, and she has to bed rot for the next 8 days. So I've been there, queen.
Being in bed.
I have been there. Not for a vision like that, mostly just because I'm addicted to my iPhone, but like, truth be told, I've been there with you, queen. We could have sat together and sent TikToks to each other on the same bed. Oh, also Frenchie dies after this exorcism, which kinda sucks, but whatever. And now that is the end of my Conjuring Universe timeline, part 1. Part 2 will be coming out very, very soon, like within the coming days, so be on the lookout for that thing. But please, subscribe, like, do whatever you need to do to make this video go viral. Thank you so much for watching it. This video was a lot of fun to make. It is a little bit more difficult because it is an entire timeline of so many movies. Thank you so much for watching. See you very, very soon. Have a good day, loves. Goodbye.